There are many communities in America that have dealt with hardship and adversity these past few years, but ladies and gentlemen, nobody needs your thoughts and prayers more urgently tonight than the good people of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, who were already dealing with the ravages of climate change, which has produced a 2/16 of an inch rise in the local sea level that threatens to inundate the entire island and send all its residents to a watery grave. And as hardy and resilient as the people of Martha's Vineyard are from having to contend with that horrific existential threat, nothing, but nothing could have prepared them for the humanitarian crisis that landed on their doorstep yesterday in the form of several dozen Venezuelan illegal aliens. As a community, you do your best to be prepared for any eventuality, any unforeseen emergency that might tax the steely resolve of your people and mine the very deepest reserves of their moral courage. But some emergencies you can never really anticipate until the moment you look out and see nothing but masses of humanity as far as the eye can see, or at least halfway down the block, at any rate. Things got so bad in Martha's Vineyard yesterday, there were reports that some residents actually had to wield their "no human being is illegal" yard signs as improvised weapons to hold back the advancing hordes of brown-skinned invaders who don't even speak English and seem unwilling to perform manual labor like normal Latinos. In an area where the average private residence boasts a mere 6 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, the strain on the local infrastructure quickly became palpable as the new arrivals increased the population by a staggering 3/1000ths of 1%. And let's take a moment here to applaud the city government for managing to keep the lights on and to maintain basic municipal services in the wake of this unprecedented invasion. These are the times that try the souls of men, and the brave people of Martha's Vineyard, well, they're facing just about as stern a test as can be imagined. I just feel, as I'm sure you all do as well, I wish there was something I could do to lend a helping hand to these poor people who have already been through so much. I don't know that I could live with myself if I turned a blind eye to human suffering on such a tragic scale, so I am going to put my money where my mouth is and use whatever meager talents I possess to assist the people of Martha's Vineyard in this, their hour of utmost need. And so this Sunday, I am pleased to announce we will be doing the first annual Curmudgeon Charity Telethon for Martha's Vineyard Relief. I have begun reaching out to my many celebrity friends, and though I haven't heard back from anyone yet, I am overflowing with confidence that this will be a star-studded must-see event, so don't you dare miss it. But I need you to do more than watch. I need you to be prepared to give and to give generously, because people are suffering, and they are suffering right now as we speak. Your donation could be the difference between life and death for these poor, destitute wretches who want nothing more than what we all want. A community where the only foreigners we see are dutiful domestic servants who immediately leave the island when they have completed their menial labor for the day. A community where affluent white liberals can walk the streets in confidence that the only people they will encounter are other affluent white liberals. A community where you will never meet anyone more ethnically exotic than Barack Obama. A community where the "all immigrants are welcome here" sign in your front window and the "diversity is our strength" bumper sticker on your car, they're not taken as literal entreaties for actual immigrants to come live on your street, but as what they really are: exercises in empty-headed virtue signaling whereby you can assuage the overwhelming guilt you feel because you have such a strong preference for living in a 100% all-white neighborhood. Which is the same reason, of course, that you have all those Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo books prominently displayed where they are the first thing a visitor sees upon entering your home. So you tell me, are you going to turn a blind eye from people in dire need of help, people who want nothing more than to breathe the air of a racially homogeneous, ultra-wealthy liberal enclave? Or are you going to listen, as Abraham Lincoln called them, to the better angels of your nature? The angels who sit on your shoulder and whisper in your ear, there are rich white liberals who are suffering tonight. and they need your help more than ever. So there you go. Are you with Abraham Lincoln? Or are you with the filthy, immoral governor of Florida who, according to an MSNBC expert political analyst, is morally indistinguishable from Adolf Hitler? I guess we will find out on Sunday. Now, Jim Eagle, hit that music like it's a disobedient stepchild. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we stand in solidarity with black Disney mermaids against right-wing racist commentators who seek to turn them translucent. What would we call that? Clearwashing? Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And it was exactly 23 years and 2 months ago, 16 July 1999, that John F. Kennedy Jr. bundled himself, his wife, and her sister into his Piper Saratoga, departed from Essex County Airport in New Jersey, attempting a flight in instrument condition when he possessed no instrument rating, and promptly slammed into the drink due to spatial disorientation, and pilot error, killing himself and his passengers. Why am I bringing up JFK Jr., you ask? Well, for a couple reasons. First, because his destination on the ill-fated flight just so happened to be Martha's Vineyard. Why was he going to Martha's Vineyard? To attend the wedding of his cousin Rory, daughter of the late Senator Robert Kennedy, which was being held at the Kennedy family compound. And how many guests were they expecting at this event? Around 400 or so. And nearly everyone had already arrived when the word came that Jack Jr. was long overdue and presumed lost at sea. But strangely, the local officials in Martha's Vineyard didn't declare any humanitarian crisis or call out the National Guard over an invasion of 400 Kennedys. They didn't even issue an advisory saying people should lock up their daughters, which seems like it would be a prudent move when there are that many male Kennedys assembled in one place. But they did that yesterday, the first two things at least, over 50 Venezuelans. Well, we don't have the infrastructure for this, they moaned. We've got a housing crisis already. Which is a fairly baffling claim when your community is made up almost exclusively of vacation homes that stand empty for the better part of the year. And when one of your famous residents is throwing a shindig or a soiree or what have you, it seems like the island has a fairly long track record of absorbing 400, 500, 1,000 extra people even, without causing any evident strain on public services, much less a humanitarian crisis. It took about 5 minutes, because of course it did, before some wild-eyed maniac commentator on MSNBC looked into the camera and declared with a straight face and complete sincerity that Ron DeSantis flying 50 Venezuelans into Martha's Vineyard is exactly the same thing as the Holocaust. Which, I don't know, seems like it might be outrageously offensive to Jewish people. If we lived in a sane world with a functioning news media, a remark like that would be quickly condemned and disavowed by the network where it was said, along with a profuse apology toward anyone Jewish, along with an assurance that the person who said it doesn't work here anymore. But none of that happened, because of course it didn't. It's perfectly okay to make light of the Holocaust, you see, as long as it might potentially make a Republican governor look bad. And that is what passes for journalistic rigor at the 5-alarm fake news dumpster fire that is MSNBC. And speaking of 5-alarm fake news dumpster fires, CNN was all over this story too, although they took the slightly different approach of sending a reporter and a camera crew up to Martha's Vineyard to get reactions from the poor, benighted, victimized Venezuelans who have fallen prey to the evil machinations of the new American Himmler. But it seemed like it didn't really go the way they wanted it to go. No matter how many of the illegal aliens they interviewed, no matter how hard they tried to ask leading questions and drag out the answers they wanted, the Venezuelans all kept saying the same thing. That was the nicest bus I've ever been on. It had air conditioning and everything. And I got to ride in a private plane. I freaking love America. When they were asked why they crossed the border illegally, they gave the same answer that we always hear. Because El Presidente Jose Biden said the border is open and we should all come on in. There were points where the CNN reporter was getting visibly frustrated, so she started really leaning into the leading questions, but Don't you feel deceived? Don't you feel misled? Don't you feel taken advantage of? No, not really. It's all been pretty great so far. And frankly, I'm surprised they didn't just put a false translation on the bottom of the screen. Yes, Ron DeSantis is a very bad hombre, probably worse than Hitler. And then Gavin Newsom tried to get in on the act because, of course he did. Though I'm having a difficult time connecting the dots here insofar as why the governor of Florida paying to fly some Venezuelans from Texas to Massachusetts is any concern of the governor of California, but damn it, Gavin Newsom wants to be president, so just shut the hell up and get off his Kool-Aid. And as a California resident who has no fonder aspiration in life than to become a former California resident, I suppose I could be forgiven for asking the governor, sir, I can't walk my dog around the block in my middle-class neighborhood without stumbling over smack junkies cooking up on the sidewalk. I can't walk across the street from my workplace without being accosted by half a dozen vagrants. I can't use the car wash at my corner gas station because it's got fucking hobos living in it. So it's a little bit offensive that the most important thing in your life seems to be the supposed plight of a few dozen illegal aliens who have never been anywhere near California, who've suffered the terrible indignity of being rewarded for their criminality by being flown on a private jet to one of the most affluent communities on planet Earth. In fact, Gavin Newsom is now demanding that Ron DeSantis be prosecuted by the feds for kidnapping. And just speaking for myself here, but if kidnapping means a free ride on a private jet to the richest neighborhood in North America, where the hell do I sign up to be kidnapped? Because I think I'd like to be kidnapped every day. And it's impossible not to wonder how this all looks from the perspective of a poor Venezuelan dirt farmer. You ingress someone's territory in contravention of their laws, and the next thing you know, you're riding on a Learjet and then a fancy air-conditioned bus, and you get dropped off in a neighborhood where the average house has more square footage than the village in which you grew up. As our friend Yakov Smirnov used to be fond of saying, what a country! And hey, as long as we're playing the game of comparing current-day people and events with National Socialists and the Third Reich, we would be remiss in not pointing out that the Democrats and the fake news industrial complex always abide by the third rule of propaganda as laid out by Dr. Joseph Goebbels. Always accuse your opponents of doing the same thing you're doing. And that's what DeSantis' real crime is here. It is doing the same thing the Democrats do in a way that makes them look like the awful, evil hypocrites that they really are. Since the day they assumed office, Biden and the enemy saboteur Mayorkas have been herding illegal aliens into the country, loading them onto airplanes, and flying them in the middle of the night to states whose governors they do not like. Meanwhile, as the president, such as he is, was threatening to throw you off your job for not getting the stupid vaccine, he wasn't testing a single illegal border crosser for COVID. He wasn't demanding that any of them get vaccinated. And it's not difficult to figure out why, because that way you can drop off a bunch of human COVID bombs into states with Republican governors and then excoriate those governors for having high COVID rates that you actively and intentionally contributed to. So yes, Daddy, give me some more of that sweet, sweet opprobrium, because you are speaking from such an unimpeachable position of moral authority, you ridiculous, sleazy scumbag, you. Now, as a practical matter, there isn't any difference whatsoever between what Abbott and DeSantis are doing and what Biden and Mayorkas have been doing for nearly 2 years now, which is transporting illegal aliens by airplane deep into the interior of the country to places where the other party is in charge. The only difference is that the federal government has been doing it in secret in the dead of night, while the governors are doing it in the broad light of day. And I believe that is what's known as getting a taste of one's own medicine. It would seem the Democrats don't like the taste of that medicine one little bit, do they? As well they shouldn't, because this looks really incredibly bad for them, and you can scream the words Hitler and racist until you are blue in the face, and it's not going to change anything. In fact, I would go so far as to say that in terms of political optics, Yesterday was probably the worst day for the Democrats since the day after Trump won the election in 2016. But here's the other reason that I brought up JFK Jr., because there is a certain delicious poetic justice in the fact that Martha's Vineyard is the place where the Democrat Party's immigration chickens have finally come home to roost. For it was Senator Ted Kennedy, along with a cadre of co-conspirators that included Senator Joe Biden, who first set this chain of events in motion around 45 years ago, when they decided to do an end run around the Constitution in order to demographically remake the country and ensure, so they hoped, permanent one-party Democrat rule. And the plan was pretty elegant in its simplicity. We'll throw open the border. We'll pretend we didn't throw it open. We'll pack in so many millions of illegal aliens that it'll be well nigh impossible to locate and remove them all. And then there will be no choice but to do a big fat amnesty, and eventually we will have tens of millions of brand new voters who know which party butters their bread and whom they owe favors to. And the big amnesty happened in 1986, of course, and let's not pretend it's only Democrats who were complicit in carrying out the scheme. The Chamber of Commerce Republicans, the Koch brothers crowd, the Willard Romney, Mitch McConnell crowd, they were fully on board with it all because they like any arrangement that provides an endless supply of dirt-cheap labor and artificially deflates the wages of American workers at the same time. It wasn't until Donald Trump came along that any nationally prominent Republican had the balls to say illegal immigration is bad, it hurts the country, so let's do something about stopping it instead of just talking about it once every 4 years during the election cycle. And why did the establishment view Trump as an existential threat? Why will they break any law, subvert any institutional norm, rig any election in order to prevent him being returned to office? That is why. Because he knows the true nature of the project that they've been running all these years, and he is not afraid to tell people that. A man starts acting that way, he needs to be discredited and destroyed at any and all costs. And it took until yesterday, 4.5 decades later, for the wages of the original sin to land on the doorstep of the original sinners. And thank God it finally happened. Thank God we have some conservative leaders. I won't say Republican leaders because that would be an insult. With the balls to play the game just as dirty as the other side plays it. Haven't we had just about enough of fake conservatives who prefer to stand politely by with their thumbs up their ass while the social fabric of the nation gets torn asunder decade after decade after decade, while culturally everything gets dragged inexorably farther and farther to the left? Because I've had about enough of it. I am ready for the cultural market correction. It's been 30 years since there was any sort of meaningful victory for the forces of social conservatism. And it's all too evident as we survey the scene in the present day. Societies need to have moral standards. Societies need to have social taboos. Societies need personal accountability to be a thing that exists. Societies need to incentivize traditional marriage and the nuclear family unit, because children have a right to be raised by a mother and a father who are married to one another. Societies that wish to still exist in some recognizable form 100 years down the road cannot organize themselves around hedonism and profligacy. But as we sign off for the evening, do remember to spare a thought for the poor persecuted souls on the island of Martha's Vineyard. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope your work week has arrived at an agreeable conclusion. Have a pleasant tomorrow. I will see you Sunday for the charity telethon. Don't miss it. Until then, do not comply. Get off my lawn.